Hi everyone. Today I want to do a quick video on the latest book I finished. Um, it is called Stoner by John Williams. Let me pull up the cover for you. I read this book electronically, as I usually read almost all of my books these days. There it is with a little bit of a glare. Maybe it's better on this side. Nope. Well, that's better. There, can you see that? Yeah, Stoner by John Williams. So I I I would love to spend an hour talking about this book because I loved it so much, but I'm going to try to keep my video to the usual less than 15 minutes. But so, I think to start out, it's real interesting to know the publication history of this novel. It was originally published in 1965, and it did not sell well. It apparently, according to what I could find on the internet, it sold like less than 2,000 copies, and so it was out of print. Um, a year later, it was already out of print, and then it was reprinted. Um, in 2003, I think by Vintage Press, decided to um, publish it again, and then again in 2006, the New York Review of Books, I think, put it on a list, and then I heard about the book in around 2013 and put it on my list to read, and I'm just now getting around to doing this because in 2012 it won an award, a book award in, I think, in Great Britain, and so it became more widely known, and so its sales, according to what I could find on the internet, pretty much tripled after that, and so it's been in public and been in print ever since. But really, that reminded me of just the book review I did, the book chat I did briefly about the Parthenon Enigma. A couple of book chats ago, about how things get lost, how art and plays and books and things like that sort of get lost to time. And this book sort of almost was lost to time in the sense of it had not been really in print since, basically 1966. And then if some other publisher or someone else hadn't discovered it and decided to bring it back into the world, there's a chance it would have, sort of disappeared from everyone's attention. So I'm so glad that it did end up getting discovered and got the publicity that it deserves, and it's out there now for everyone to enjoy, and I did really enjoy it a lot. It's what it's about. It's a very simple story. It's about this guy named William Stoner who he is born into this dirt poor family at the turn of the 20th century. So, around this time is the time we're talking about, around 1900. And so he really doesn't have an expectation to go to college or anything like that. He is just, they sort of have this subsistence existence on this relatively small farm. And so he hears about a new school opening up, and this is the University of Missouri in Columbia. Although from what I read in the foreword, the author John Williams was also an interesting person. He actually died in the 90s, so it's a shame he didn't get a chance to see this book get republished. But he mentioned that the University of Missouri that he depicts in this book is fictional. He actually had his career at the University of Denver, I think, or somewhere in Colorado. Anyway, that's a digression. This guy, William Stoner, he ends up going to university, and he's going to study agriculture and agronomy, but when he's there, he actually, in his second year, I believe it is, he's taking a literature survey course, and after experiencing Shakespeare's Sonnet number 73, he sort of falls in love with literature, and he changes his course of study, and so he actually continues on there, and it's sort of when he actually breaks that news to his parents, it's pretty heartbreaking, really, because they support him in one sense, but in the other sense, they don't understand this world he's entering at all. But anyway, to make a long story short about this book and sort of what it's about in general, it's a very simple story. So it's about this ordinary man's academic not really necessarily his academic life, but his whole life, set in in a university sort of setting, though, because that's his career. And even though it's this tale of an ordinary person's life, it's so big. The tale is, it's just so interesting and compelling. Even though if I tell you now what it's about, you probably might not think it's compelling, but the way it's written and the information that's presented to us, it really is a compelling story. He does eventually become he becomes a professor there, and marries and has a daughter. His life is sort of filled with these sorts of sort of every person's, not every person's, but a lot of people's experience where they form a relationship, maybe they get married, they have a job, this sort of thing. But it's just it's a very compelling story, because in a way, when you read it, you get the sense of he really struggles with so many things. There's a very interesting quote from the book. It's, "There are wars and defeats and victories of the human race that are not military and are not recorded in the annals of history." And this really pertains to his life, because it's not necessarily a story of a lot of conflicts, and yet it's a story of conflicts, because it's a story of someone's life, and everyone's life contains conflicts. And so in his life, there are people who would be, that he could connect to and love, and then there are other people who sort of work against him in that and work and sort of seem to try to separate him from those things that he loved, and those people have their own stories. So one idea that I took away, when I finished reading this and closed the book, or closed my electronic book, the first thing that I thought was how fragile humans are. Because even the so-called bad people in the novel, they were really reacting in a lot of ways to their own fragilities, and so I was just totally swept away by that idea of how fragile we are. That was an idea that I took away from the book when I had finished it. I could really identify with William Stoner character in so many ways. At one time, the story is told in third person, so we have this sort of this grand narrator, but the narrator says that William Stoner, sometimes he would be reading and he would realize just how much he didn't actually know, when he was immersing in his books, because he came from this background where none of that existed. And I felt that myself when I'm reading. Sometimes I think, oh, how did I not know this before now? And then I realize just exactly what it is I don't know. And and then another really sort of interesting idea I thought that came out about William Stoner, the character, is that he changed so much from what he had expected himself to be as a young man to then later on in his life, when he looked back on his life, he didn't even recognize who this strange person was that he was, in his earlier life, and I felt that way myself too sometimes. So although that was extremely interesting, and really, really connected me, I think, to this story and to this novel, and to William Stoner as a main character. Although, the other main characters are his wife Edith, his daughter Grace. He had a mentor, Archer Sloane, at the university that sort of introduced literature to him, and he always considered him a mentor. He had a couple of friends, one of whom he worked with his whole life, and he's there. Then there was another professor, Lomax, who he really feels an affinity with early on, but then life happens in between them, and different things happen. Then ultimately he also, as he marries his wife, sort of, falls in love with her. Originally, he falls in love with an idea of her rather than actually her. But I think she's just an incredible character herself. I would love to now hear her story. And it's a shame the author John Williams is no longer alive, so he can't tell us more about Edith, because I think that she had her own story definitely to tell that I would love to know more about. And I won't go into that too much because I don't want to completely give it away, although it's not really a book. This is an atmospheric book, I think. To me it was. It wasn't a narrative-driven. It wasn't like an action-driven story, but I don't want to give it away too much in case, because I don't want to take away the experience from anyone from reading it. So, at the end of it, though, we do follow Stoner's life all the way through his life. So we progress all through till kind of the middle of the 20th century, I think, when he ultimately, his life ends. And I don't think that's a spoiler to give that away, because the story is about his whole life, so it stretches his whole life. So we do go to the very end of that. And, he's got one of the best death scenes ever that I've ever read. Just wonderfully done and beautiful. I've heard it said that, at the end of it all, we are all ultimately alone. And, I think that that's true. And Stoner actually was alone his whole life, I think. I didn't mention it, but if the painting American Gothic, by Grant Wood, with the farmer couple, with the pitchfork standing in front of the house, it evoked that so much to me. His parents could be that couple. And Stoner himself, is sort of carrying on that sort of. I think it's almost sort of an American, maybe cultural touchstone, that hardworking, grim, really not low expectation, not expecting anything but hard work. That sort of Midwestern myth that came out of American Gothic depicts. I think Stoner sort of has that in himself, sort of a stoic, withdrawn acceptance of fate. When fate, he does, he's not fatalistic, meaning he doesn't just accept whatever comes along. He does connect to literature, and that is the one constant throughout his life, that sort of abstraction, but that's an internal personalization of himself. And the author John Williams, in the foreword of the book I read, actually mentions this about literature, and that he thinks that William Stoner, in the book, as far as being a failure or being a hero, he considered him a hero because he actually found something he truly loved and could connect to his whole life, and that was the love of literature. And so I thought that was very cool and very moving. He's had a very moving life at the end of it all. So I think I will leave it at that. I'm about out of time. I loved the book. It's one of those books that it seems like I've read a couple of these this year that I could easily reread. The Book of Disquiet by Fernando Pessoa is another one. This one I think I could reread and probably get more out of it, even reading it another time. So that's going to be on my list of things to do eventually. I think I'll stop with that. So until next time, I will see you then.